Morning.
Good morning. It's good to talk to you, Sarah.
Nice to talk to you too.
Yes. So you and I met or connected because of your project, 1001 Cuts, which I'm super excited about and really happy to be a small, tiny sponsor of this project.
Thanks, Jessica. And the project is really arose from my own personal experience as being a surgeon and a woman. But it's become so much more than that because has been really meaningful to a lot of people. I think it's touched a nerve for many surgeons who are women who felt like they were the only person who had these types of experiences of being minimized or dismissed at work, or having had their workplace be very dysfunctional, or a feeling of not belonging within the profession. And there's been so many physicians and surgeons that have reached out to contribute to this. But also, I think the stories tell a larger story about about structural sexism in the workplace, and how the work that women do is sometimes and often devalued, such that women struggle to get equipment that they need. The equipment they need may not even exist. And certainly for, relevant to your work is that women don't get paid the same, and may not even feel comfortable asking for a salary that's equivalent to what their male colleagues are making.
Right, absolutely. And I think, we've talked about how this documentary and the outtakes that I've seen really resonate with women across the board who are having these experiences, and that part of the change comes from learning how to negotiate for yourself, to stand up for what you need to excel in your job, in your workplace, and to be comfortable doing that. And I think, men are more comfortable doing that, and it's more acceptable for them to do that. And we need to be part of the change for ourselves and for the next generations, to have those uncomfortable conversations, to build those muscles to the point where you understand that when you go into your career, whether it's medicine or business, whatever your career may be, that you need to feel comfortable negotiating for yourself, and to expect transparency in your compensation, in your benefits, in your support staff, in what administration is going to do, or what your employers are going to do to help you succeed in your work, so that you can, and this benefits everybody. When people have transparency and trust and psychological safety in the workplace, they perform better. It optimizes their performance for the organization, and in medicine, it increases good patient care. And it's just really important that we have these conversations, that we change the mindset and strengthen the mindset of advocating for ourselves and for our colleagues.
Yeah, I think what the really important thing that you are hitting on is this idea of transparency, right? And the operating room is such like a mystical, mythical old boys club that's like hidden from view. Like oftentimes people don't even know where the entrance is, or there's a secret entrance. And so a lot of these negotiations that women go through in surgical fields are occur in that vein, sort of shrouded in mystery and secrecy, and it's to the I agree with you, it's to the detriment of everybody, because a lot of women have stories of have told me stories about not knowing that they had less support in the clinic or in the operating room than their male colleagues. Something that I talked about recently that people didn't know was that the time that you get in the operating room, which is called block time, is like something so incredibly valuable, because if you have block time in the beginning of the week, then your patients all go home by the weekend, and it improve, or most of the time go home by the weekend, and it just massively increases your quality of life, to not have to worry over your time off, or not have to go in and see your patients over the weekend, because they've all been discharged home safely. And for many women, there is such a struggle to get just that basic of time, operating room time, that they need. Like, I told somebody this the other day, that when in my first job, my block time that I was assigned was Friday afternoon. And so it wasn't even like Friday morning. And I was like, oh, I should have asked for this when I signed my contract. It didn't even occur to me that I wouldn't be, given these basic building blocks to be able to start and perform my career.
That's right.
Because, on Friday, everything urgent's being added on, and what was supposed to be Friday at noon, I was always starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Fridays, and it did not. I think we all want to be set up for success, right? We care about our patients tremendously, and we care about our skill set tremendously. And when you're not set up for success, it's a terrible disappointment.
Well, and I think, that's a really good point. And so we have to go into our first jobs, every subsequent job and contract, putting that in writing, understanding that nothing is a given, that we need to negotiate these points. We need to know what our counterparts have for block time, or, whatever the case may be, for compensation, for benefits. We need to have that information, that data, and then we have to go in and negotiate for that. You can't take it for granted that you're going to be treated equally. You have to assume that you likely, trust but verify is the bottom line, and put it in writing, because if it's not in writing, it didn't occur. You have to just understand that, and that, administrations change, department chairs change, hospitals change hands. You need to get that in writing so you can level the playing field when you go into a new job. That's really important. And you just, especially for physicians, you didn't go into business, you went into medicine, but medicine is a business, and you have to go into that with the mindset, especially if you're female, that you need to have an outline for what you need to be successful, and you need to negotiate that, and to know that they need you. We all know that there's a shortage of physicians, and that's not going to get better over time. And especially in certain markets, there's a market demand for physicians. You have a great negotiating set to go to the administration, to employers, and to get what you need to be successful. I think it really starts with the willingness to negotiate, and women, and this isn't my opinion or your opinion or our experience. This is just the data. Women are less likely to negotiate for themselves. They don't think that they'll be successful. They're more pessimistic about the outcome of negotiation, and they expect less money from the get-go than their male counterparts do. And so, we cannot acquiesce to that. It's time to stand up and say, what, this is what the median, or the benchmark is for compensation or for productivity, and to use that data and to go in and negotiate a reasonable contract with the support that you need to excel in your job.
So part of what I think I always get a little stuck on is like negotiation. Like, both people have to come to the table wanting a good faith negotiation. And so I think a lot of what women's hesitation to negotiate is somewhat rational, because on the other side, the hospitals or their department chairs or their partners in a practice are at baseline a little less willing to negotiate on things with women than they are with men. And so, I think one solution to that potentially is for women to help each other negotiate, right? We all know that women, or we don't all know this, but this is another like fact or our data point, that women are perceived better across the board when they negotiate for another woman, right? When women act on behalf of another woman, it's perceived as like, oh, the mama bear role or
Right.
whatever. And so, I think that's one of the other real take-home points or themes of this film and the experience of talking to so many women who are surgeons, is that we all could do a better job helping each other and standing up other women, supporting each other. And I think for too long, it's been the scarcity model that there's only going to be one woman who gets the raise, or there's only going to be one woman who gets a leadership position. Whereas, we, I think, can build a bigger pie or a bigger table where when we as women support other women, we actually make the whole system better for everyone.
Yeah, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not that I have to climb on top of somebody else, to get my share. We all rise together, and that is absolutely true. And, it's also, it's very lonely. I think your project, what it sheds light on is that none of us are alone in this. We've all had, whether it's in medicine or business or law, we've all had similar experiences, but it feels very lonely in a male-dominated field. And to know that there are similar stories out there, and smart, dedicated, strong women who have had those similar experiences, who will support you, it's extremely empowering and inspirational. And that's, we need that, especially right now. It takes a village, and that's for sure. And we rise together, and it's not one or the other, it's all of us. And
yeah, there's that corny saying that like a rising tide raises all boats, but it's really true in this matter, because we can't, the system was designed by men for men to succeed, and just continuing to play the same game and compete with each other is not going to work.
Right, it isn't going to work. And I think, too, we as women need to change our mindset. We need to support other women, and we need to get comfortable. I've had those experiences with administration. You and I have talked about this before. I walked my first negotiation with administration on behalf of a practice that I was managing was terrible. I mean, they had the data, they knew how to use the data, and they didn't feel that it was necessary to share it with me. I was charged with negotiating on behalf of the practice that I was representing, and I didn't have the same information that they did. And until I got the data and got the training and did the continuing education, then I became really effective negotiating with them. And it's interesting because once it comes down to the numbers, when you are going head to head with administration, and they have their, Sullivan Cotter data set, and you have your MGMA data set, and you're going head to head on the numbers, so much of the gender issues, the obstacles fall away, because then it's just the numbers, and they can't, instead of patting me on the head and saying, there's the door, we're going to pay you, we told you what's in our data set, and that's what we're going to pay you, and it's not incumbent upon us to share that data with you. it changed the whole dynamic. It made for really good, honest negotiation. They knew I was going to come in every year and review the call pay, the medical director pay. I mean, they knew.
Yeah.
Coming in.
I mean, it's back to that issue of transparency, right? And also just negotiating in good faith. I think, yeah, I think there's the horror stories of negotiation where I mean, I had this happen to me personally where I showed up and I didn't have an office, right? And you're like, oh, I should have like asked for an office in my contract. Like, why didn't I think of that? And so, my hope is that by having people negotiate with data and be rational and transparent about this, that we all, we make things better for everything. And you and I both know that turnover is so expensive.
Absolutely.
And so,
It's hundreds of thousands of dollars or more to replace a physician. Hospitals, by and large, do not want to replace you. They've spent a tremendous amount of money recruiting you, getting you in place, investing in you to get your productivity up. They don't want to lose you. And you combine that with a market shortage of physicians that's exacerbated depending on where you're located. You're a hot commodity, and it's extremely disruptive and expensive to lose physicians in a hospital system or a practice setting. So, and you need to know that physicians need to go in knowing what their strengths are, what their negotiating strengths are, and see what you can do to resolve, to get what you need in your current contract or resolve issues as they come up. And sometimes that's just not possible. And then it is time to make a change. But knowing that you are in great demand is important. Everybody should go into a negotiation empowered with the data and the market analysis of where you fit in that market.
Yeah, I mean, and this is maybe my last point about that I'm trying to make with the film too, and I think this is so important, that it's so bad for patient care, right? When women are treated badly in the workplace, that to the point that they look for new jobs, they move from their job, they leave medicine entirely, which I've spoken to so many surgeons that just decided they couldn't do it anymore because of all of these the accumulation of small aggressions, dismissals, devaluations of their work, and that leaves patients with fewer choices about patient care. And there's, every month it seems like there's a new publication that's demonstrating that the patients who have women physicians are actually have better outcomes. And so there's a way it's good for patient care to keep women in the workforce. And there's potentially things that male physicians and male surgeons could even learn from their women colleagues if we were valued, respected, and kept in the workforce.
Absolutely. We can't afford to lose female physicians because of the shortages, number one, that are only going to continue to grow. And absolutely, I mean, it is proven that female patients have better outcomes with female physicians and surgeons. And to lose that would be a tremendous loss for the system. I think it's a matter, that can't happen. It's just it just simply can't. So what we need to do is empower women, physicians and surgeons to navigate this, to recognize it, and to charge at it head on, to understand that there's gender bias even in workplaces where the majority of the workforce is female. This is ingrained into our society, and we need to recognize that and stand up and not be self-silenced and not Then with more education on gender bias, and our team is working now going through the gender bias scale, which is really fascinating, to identify this in your workplace, in your life, and to address it. And I think with that education and the awareness of it, when there's a microaggression or someone says something to you, to be able to take a step back and put it and understand, you know what, that's gender bias, and it's hurtful to me, but I'm going to address it this way. I have identified it and I'm going to address it. And that's really powerful.
Yeah. And, it also, I just also know from my own experience and from talking to so many people and from reading literature on this, it's bad for men too, right? Like men are affected when they witness discrimination or bias in the workplace or harassment. It leads to job dissatisfaction in men, and so they're really, like, our profession's motto is do no harm. Like there shouldn't be a place for this, and so I think, yeah.
And I think for men, we need to empower men to A, recognize this, and then B, when you see something, say something, stand up for your female counterparts, recognize these patterns and help, be an advocate to help make a change. That's so important. And you're right. I mean, shortages on a team hurt everybody. That leads to burnout. People feel overwhelmed. When there's a lot of staff turnover and everyone has to carry more weight, everybody bears the burden of that. So, and men obviously love women. They have wives and daughters and mothers and sisters, so encouraging men and seeing them as advocates when we can, to say, if that were my daughter, is that how I would have wanted my colleague to speak to her? I know this it doesn't sit right in my stomach. I'm going to stand up and say something about it. And there are many men who will do that and need to be encouraged to recognize it and to stand up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so cool, like, that we're at this point in history where all these male surgeons are seeing their daughters train as surgeons. And I think it makes it more tangible and real how, we can have a bigger tent. We can, that talent doesn't only come in one body shape and size, and that we, that we as a profession can improve and be better, and by doing so, by creating workplaces that are more open and fair and transparent, that we can improve the care that our patients get.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. And that's what I want. I have two daughters, one in college, one in undergrad, and one in grad school. And that's what I want for them. I want them to go out into the world and to be, to recognize what challenges are and what they're going to have to navigate through their careers, and to feel really comfortable identifying that, addressing, what it's going to be like for them to be women in the workforce, and to be able to negotiate for themselves and to advocate for themselves and their, fellow women in the workforce, for sure. I mean, and I think in terms of physicians, that really needs to happen coming right out of residency and fellowship and training in that very first job, and knowing that when you sign that contract, and it's a 3 or 5 year contract, that at the end of that 3-year contract period, don't let that contract auto renew. Go back, take a look at it, look at your productivity, look at the new data that's out, and be prepared. It's like maintenance, right? So be prepared every time that contract renews, to do the due diligence and understand what's changed in the market, where your productivity falls in line with other surgeons and physicians in that specialty, and update your contract. and do that throughout your career. And if you find that you need more support staff, and the other thing is, I mean, some of the clients that I've worked with have let their contracts go for years. So, it just auto renews, and it's really not incumbent upon the hospital system or your employer to come to you and say, hey, we want to update your contract, or, I mean, hopefully they would do that because that's proactive if you want to retain physicians.
Right.
But that doesn't happen very often. And so it's important for you to stand up and say, you know what, my contract's getting ready to renew. I want to know where the numbers are. Am I still in line? Am I still at the median? Am I at the 75th percentile? Where do I fall? Or, I've taken on additional duties, which women do. Women are much more likely to volunteer, to sit on additional committees, to take on additional responsibilities. We're less likely to say no, more likely to say yes. And then that's fine. But does your productivity targets, do those need to be offset as a result of additional administrative duties? Likely so. It's just a mindset of going into this. Like, I didn't go into business. I went into medicine, or, I have a daughter who will be an artist. I have a daughter who will be a psychologist, but it's important for them to go into those careers and understand, I'm going to have to, I need to know these numbers. I didn't go into business, but I need to have this mindset, and I need to know the numbers.
Yeah.
And we're responsible for doing that, right? I mean, we can't, we need to control our own destinies, and we can. There's so much data out there. There's so much information to do that, for sure.
Absolutely. I know, I agree with you. And I think and it has to be a I think that's the point. It needs to be a collective. Like, each individual woman shouldn't be in a position of having to risk her career herself by asking for things that a hospital system is not willing to give her. But if we normalize this across our culture, hopefully we can make progress.
Yes. And that, I mean, I've had a meeting with an administrator and a client that I was working with, and the administrator said, he made the comment that he was knee deep in negotiations with an orthopedic group, and I looked at my clients and thought, who was really uncomfortable going in to ask for this contract renewal. She was really uncomfortable with it. And I looked at her when he said that, because the bottom line is, I can tell you the orthopedic group has no problem going to administration to renegotiate their contract. To them, it's expected, and they're happy to do it. It's a challenge. To the client that I was working with at the time, it was really overwhelming and a little frightening, and I wanted her to have, I wanted her to pick up on that, and she did, and we talked about it. And she is a director in her department, and tells her residents that she's working with how you need to do this from the start. You need to prepare to go in and be ready to negotiate.
Right. Well, also, if your employer is willing to negotiate with you as a woman and is fair in negotiations, it's a very good sign that that's going to be a better workplace and a more fair and transparent workplace.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, I mean, I just sat through 6 hours of MGMA physician compensation webinars last week for my continuing education. And, provider compensation is really complicated. It's very complicated. The people who are drafting these plans for the hospital are a little overwhelmed by it because it's changing. CMS is changing, the reimbursements are changing. And, they are hearing, they know that they're facing shortages. They know the cost of having to recruit, turnover, of physician turnover. They understand that cost, and they don't, they want to discourage that. They want to work with physicians. They need to work with physicians. It benefits them. So I think, part of it is physicians knowing what their negotiating power is, right? And to hear that from the other side. And that's where some of the transparency comes in and leveling this playing field. I hated that feeling when I was trying to negotiate with administration. And I didn't, he who has the gold makes the rules. Well, they had the gold because they had the data and I didn't at that point. And I couldn't accept that. I couldn't negotiate. I couldn't do my fiduciary duty for my practice without working on a level playing field. And it changed my perception of recruiting doctors. And I mean, I had this open book policy of, when I sent a physician a letter of intent to try to recruit them, we talked about where this falls in line with MGMA, the RVU targets that we had, where they fell in line geographically with where we were recruiting to. I mean, just an open book, because I just felt that I had more chance of recruiting somebody who knew that we were being open and honest about the data, and that we were putting productivity targets in their contract that they could actually meet.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I've seen RVU requirements for bonuses that are way out of line with what physicians are producing in that market. It's like, well, you're setting somebody up to fail from the beginning, and that's a terrible way to start a relationship.
Yeah. Well, that's what's so exciting about all of what's happening right now, is that we are leveling the playing field. We're opening the door, we're letting the light, we're opening the windows and letting the light in, so that we can, for ourselves and for the women that come after us, have that more level playing field.
And you think about, you make these decisions, physicians have, you make evidence-based decisions, and you go in and you make life or death decisions for patients. It's an incredible responsibility. And you do that with the knowledge that you have every piece of data available to you, and you have the confidence to go in and make those decisions in the OR. And and I want people to go in and negotiate for themselves, empowered with that same feeling. You know what? I have the evidence. I have the data. What I'm asking for is reasonable, and it's completely appropriate for me to have this conversation and to renegotiate my contract. And I think but in addition to that, I think what you're doing is bringing women together, and beyond the data, it's bringing women, inspiring women and connecting women in a way that is so powerful. And I'm thrilled with what you're doing. I really am.
Well, thanks so much. It's been so great to talk and chat about how we can make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can, we just we can't stop pushing. And I think what you're doing in your documentary and the stories that you're telling are so compelling and powerful. And I applaud you. And yeah, and it's been great through social media. I mean, we're lucky. We live in a time where we can connect. I mean, you and I wouldn't have connected if it hadn't been for social media. And I'm just thrilled to have the opportunity to collaborate with you.
Thanks so much. It's been great to talk today.
You too.